In 1997, a brutal crime in Florida left a family shattered and a community terrified. For over 2 decades, the case went cold, until a tiny trace of DNA cracked the silence wide open, leading to an arrest that no one saw coming. And wait until you hear who the DNA pointed to. It was July 15, 1997, the kind of sweltering Florida night where the air hangs thick and heavy, and even the crickets sound exhausted. 19-year-old Emily Carter had just finished her evening shift at Mel's Diner in Clearwater Springs, a small town where everyone knew your name and your business. Emily wasn't just another teenage waitress trying to make ends meet. She was the girl who lit up every room she entered. Her co-workers remember her infectious laugh echoing through the diner, even during the busiest dinner rushes. Her dream was to become a veterinarian, and she'd been saving every tip to pay for college applications. That night, like so many others, Emily said goodbye to her manager, Janet Kowalski, around 10:30 p.m. She grabbed her purse, a worn leather bag her grandmother had given her, and headed to her white Honda Civic in the parking lot. Janet watched through the window as Emily's headlights disappeared down Main Street, heading toward the residential area where Emily lived with her parents. It was the last time anyone would see Emily Carter alive. When Emily didn't come home that night, her parents, Robert and Linda Carter, initially weren't alarmed. At 19, Emily sometimes stayed overnight at her friend's house after late shifts. But when she didn't show up for her morning shift the next day, something Emily had never done without calling, panic set in. The call to 911 came at 11:47 a.m. on July 16th. Linda Carter's voice was barely a whisper as she reported her daughter missing. Within hours, Clearwater Springs Police Department had launched a search that would become the most extensive in the town's history. What they found first was Emily's car. The white Honda Civic sat on the shoulder of Route 19, about 3 miles from the diner. The driver's door was unlocked, hanging slightly ajar. Emily's purse remained on the passenger seat, her wallet intact with $43 still inside. Her keys were gone. But here's what chilled investigators to the bone. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no blood, no torn clothing. It was as if Emily had simply stepped out of her car and vanished into thin air. Detective Mike Hendricks, who led the initial investigation, later said it was the eeriest crime scene he'd encountered in his 20-year career. The car looked like someone had parked it and walked away, except Emily Carter was nowhere to be found. Before we continue, I need to ask you something. Families wait decades for answers like this, and we bring you these stories that big media forgets. The least you can do is hit that subscribe button and share this video so more forgotten victims get their voices heard. Don't scroll past without doing your part. Within 24 hours of finding Emily's car, Clearwater Springs transformed into a town on edge. Search parties formed spontaneously, with volunteers combing through palmetto scrub, drainage ditches, and abandoned buildings. Helicopters circled overhead, while K9 units tracked Emily's scent to the spot where her car was found, then lost it completely. The local media descended like vultures. Emily's photo appeared on every news channel across Central Florida. Her parents stood before cameras, Linda clutching a framed picture of Emily in her graduation cap, begging for information. Robert, a usually private man who worked at the local hardware store, broke down on live television. "Someone out there knows what happened to our little girl," he pleaded. "Please, if you have any information at all, help us bring Emily home." But as days turned into weeks, leads began to dry up. Police interviewed everyone who had contact with Emily in the days before her disappearance. They started with the obvious suspects, Emily's ex-boyfriend, Travis Morrison, who worked at the auto parts store across town. Travis and Emily had dated for 8 months before breaking up in May, just 2 months before she vanished. Friends described the breakup as messy. Travis had become increasingly possessive and jealous, showing up at the diner during Emily's shifts and calling her constantly. Emily had confided to her best friend, Melissa Torres, that Travis couldn't accept it was over. On the night Emily disappeared, Travis claimed he was home watching television with his roommate. His alibi checked out, but Detective Hendricks wasn't entirely convinced. Something about Travis's demeanor during questioning felt off. He was too calm, too rehearsed. Then there was Danny Walsh, a 42-year-old line cook at Mel's Diner, who'd been asking Emily out for weeks. Danny was known around town as a drifter with a drinking problem and a violent temper. Several witnesses had seen him arguing with Emily just days before she vanished. When police searched Danny's trailer, they found newspaper clippings about Emily's disappearance. Danny claimed he was just following the story like everyone else, but investigators found it suspicious. His alibi for July 15th was shaky. He said he was drinking alone at Murphy's bar, but the bartender couldn't confirm exactly when he'd left. But the most disturbing lead came from a truck driver named Carl Brennan, who had been passing through town on his way to Miami. Carl contacted police 3 days after Emily's disappearance, claiming he'd seen a young woman matching Emily's description getting into a dark sedan on Route 19 around midnight on July 15th. "She looked scared," Carl told investigators, "like she didn't want to get in that car but someone was making her." The problem was, Carl couldn't identify the make or model of the sedan, and he'd been driving for 14 hours straight. His credibility as a witness was questionable at best. As summer turned to fall, the investigation hit one dead end after another. Travis Morrison passed a polygraph test. Danny Walsh's DNA didn't match any evidence found in Emily's car. Carl Brennan's sighting couldn't be corroborated. The case that had consumed Clearwater Springs was growing cold. What investigators uncovered next would change everything. During the initial processing of Emily's car, crime scene technicians collected every possible piece of evidence: fingerprints from the steering wheel and door handles, fibers from the seats, hair samples from the headrest, and wedged between the driver's seat and the center console, they found something that seemed insignificant at the time: a cigarette butt. It was a Marlboro Red, barely smoked, as if someone had taken just a few drags before discarding it. The cigarette was catalogued as evidence item W47 and stored in a box at the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. In 1997, DNA testing was still in its infancy for local law enforcement. The technology existed, but it was expensive and time-consuming, reserved for only the most promising pieces of evidence. Detective Hendricks made the decision to focus on what seemed like stronger leads: the ex-boyfriend, the creepy co-worker, the mysterious truck driver's account. The cigarette butt sat in evidence storage, waiting. Years passed. The Emily Carter case file grew thicker with false leads and dead ends. Robert and Linda Carter held vigils every July 15th, standing in the parking lot of Mel's Diner, with flickering candles and fading hope. Local news stations would run brief updates on slow news days, but public interest had moved on to newer tragedies. Detective Hendricks retired in 2008. The case was reassigned to Detective Grace Benn, a younger investigator who had grown up hearing whispers about the girl who vanished on Route 19. Ben inherited boxes of evidence and witness statements, but no clear path to resolution. By 2015, the Emily Carter case was officially classified as a cold case. Linda Carter had developed severe depression and rarely left her house. Robert Carter had aged decades in the span of years, his hair gone completely gray, his once bright eyes now hollow with grief. But Emily's case was about to get a second chance. In 2020, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office received a federal grant specifically designed to fund DNA testing on cold cases. The grant targeted unsolved murders and disappearances from the 1990s and early 2000s, before modern DNA analysis became standard practice. Detective Ben saw an opportunity. She pulled the Emily Carter evidence boxes from storage and began reviewing every item with fresh eyes. When she reached evidence item number 47, the cigarette butt found in Emily's car, she made a decision that would finally bring justice. The cigarette was sent to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement lab with instructions to extract and analyze any available DNA. The results would take 6 months to process, but Detective Ben had learned patience in her 15-year career. What came back from the lab would shock everyone involved in the case. By the way, if you think this case is disturbing, you haven't seen anything yet. I've put together 2 exclusive books that go far deeper than YouTube ever allows. The first, too disturbing for YouTube. 7 Shocking Murder Stories reveals crimes so graphic they'd be banned on this platform. The second, The Killer's Mind, the psychology behind murders, takes you inside the twisted thinking of killers themselves. You can get both for the price of a coffee. Check the description below before they disappear. Trust me, you don't want to miss out. March 12, 2021. Detective Grace Ben was reviewing case files when her phone rang. The caller ID showed the FDLE lab, and Ben's heart rate immediately quickened. After 6 months of waiting, she was about to learn whether the cigarette butt from Emily Carter's car would finally provide answers. The lab technician's voice was professional, but excited. Detective Ben, we have a complete DNA profile from your evidence sample. Male DNA, excellent quality, 13 markers identified. We ran it through CODIS immediately. CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, is the FBI's national DNA database. It contains profiles from convicted felons, crime scene evidence, and unidentified remains from across the country. A hit in CODIS could instantly solve a case that had been cold for over 2 decades. Did you get a match? Ben asked, hardly daring to hope. We did. The profile matches a man named Kenneth Russo. Date of birth, February 8, 1971. He's in the system because of a 2019 arrest for domestic battery in Orange County. Detective Ben frantically wrote down the information. Kenneth Russo. The name meant nothing to her, but that was about to change. Within hours, Ben had pulled Kenneth Russo's complete criminal history. Born and raised in Queens, New York, Russo had moved to Florida in 1995 at age 24. In July 1997, when Emily Carter disappeared, Kenneth Russo was 26 years old and living in Clearwater, just 15 miles from where Emily's car was found. But here's where the case took a shocking turn. Kenneth Russo had never been considered a suspect. His name appeared nowhere in the original investigation files. He had no obvious connection to Emily Carter, no history of working at Mel's diner, no apparent motive for harming her. So how did his DNA end up in Emily's car? Detective Ben began digging deeper into Russo's background. In 1997, he had been working as a mechanic at Peterson's Auto Repair in Clearwater. The shop specialized in foreign cars, including Honda Civics. Ben's pulse quickened as she realized the potential connection. Phone records from July 1997 were long gone, but Ben tracked down Harold Peterson, the original owner of the repair shop. Now in his 70s and living in a retirement community in Sarasota, Peterson remembered Kenneth Russo clearly. Kenny was a decent mechanic, but he had problems, Peterson told Ben. Drinking mostly, but also issues with women. He couldn't take no for an answer, if you know what I mean. I had to let him go in late 1997 because of complaints from female customers. Peterson's words sent chills down Ben's spine. She pressed for more details about Russo's behavior toward women, and what Peterson revealed painted a disturbing picture of a man who became aggressive when rejected. But Peterson remembered something else, something that would prove crucial to the case. In July 1997, Peterson's Auto Repair had received a call from a young woman whose Honda Civic was making strange noises. She had scheduled an appointment for July 16th, the day after Emily Carter disappeared. The woman never showed up for her appointment. Peterson still had his old appointment book stored in his garage. Ben drove to Sarasota the same day, her hands shaking as Peterson flipped through yellowed pages from 1997. And there it was, written in Peterson's careful handwriting. July 16th, 10 a.m., Honda Civic, Emily C. Emily had planned to have her car serviced the morning after she vanished. Someone at Peterson's Auto Repair knew she would be bringing her car in. Someone who had access to the appointment schedule. Someone who might have seen an opportunity, Kenneth Russo. But if Emily never made it to the repair shop, how did Russo's DNA end up in her car? Ben was about to uncover the horrifying truth. Armed with DNA evidence linking Kenneth Russo to Emily Carter's disappearance, Detective Ben began building a comprehensive case. She started by tracking Russo's movements over the past 24 years, and what she discovered was deeply troubling. After leaving Peterson's Auto Repair in late 1997, Russo had moved frequently throughout Florida, Tampa, Jacksonville, Fort Myers, Orlando, never staying in one place for more than a few years. His employment history was spotty, mostly short-term jobs in auto repair shops and construction sites. More disturbing was his criminal record. The 2019 domestic battery charge that had gotten his DNA into the system was just the tip of the iceberg. Ben found a pattern of harassment and stalking complaints dating back to 1998, most filed by young women in their late teens and early 20s. None had resulted in serious charges, but the pattern was unmistakable. In 2003, Russo had been questioned in connection with the disappearance of 22-year-old Nicole Brennan in Jacksonville. Nicole's car had been found abandoned near the St. Johns River, her purse and keys missing, eerily similar to Emily Carter's case. But without DNA evidence or witnesses, the investigation had stalled. Russo had moved to Fort Myers shortly after being questioned. Ben immediately contacted Jacksonville police about the Nicole Brennan case. If Russo was responsible for Emily Carter's disappearance, were there other victims? But Ben's immediate focus remained on building an airtight case against Russo for Emily's murder. Because by 2021, Detective Ben was certain that Emily Carter was dead, even though her body had never been found. The breakthrough in understanding how Russo's DNA ended up in Emily's car came from an unlikely source: security camera footage from a gas station on Route 19. In 2021, Ben was reviewing the original case files when she noticed something that had been overlooked in 1997. A gas station attendant had mentioned seeing a young woman who matched Emily's description at around 10:45 p.m. on July 15th, just 15 minutes after Emily left work. The gas station, Quick Stop on Route 19, was directly on Emily's route home. In 1997, the security cameras used analog tapes that were recycled every 30 days. The footage from July 15th had been recorded over long before police thought to request it. But Ben had an idea. She contacted the gas station's current owner and learned that the business had changed hands several times since 1997. However, the original security system had been upgraded in 2001, and the installation company had kept backup files of the old system's configuration. It was a long shot, but Ben requested any archived footage or records from July 1997. What came back was a grainy, barely visible image from July 15th, 10:43 p.m. It showed a young woman who appeared to be Emily Carter pumping gas into a white Honda Civic. But here's the crucial detail. In the background of the image, barely visible, was a dark pickup truck parked near the air pump. The truck's license plate was too blurry to read, but Ben could make out a partial view of the driver, a man with dark hair wearing a baseball cap. Ben cross-referenced motor vehicle records from 1997 with Kenneth Russo's information. In July 1997, Russo owned a dark blue Ford F-150 pickup truck. The pieces were finally falling into place. Detective Ben now believed she understood what had happened to Emily Carter on the night of July 15, 1997. Emily had stopped for gas on her way home from work. Kenneth Russo, either by chance or because he had been following her, was at the same gas station. Perhaps Russo recognized Emily from the appointment she had scheduled at Peterson's Auto Repair. Perhaps he saw an opportunity to approach her about her car troubles. Or perhaps it was something more sinister, a predator who had been watching his prey. What happened next could only be speculation, but the DNA evidence told a clear story. Russo had been inside Emily's car. Whether Emily had willingly accepted help from someone she thought was a legitimate mechanic, or whether Russo had forced his way into her vehicle, the result was the same. Emily Carter was never seen again, but in March 2021, Kenneth Russo was about to discover that 24 years of freedom were coming to an end. Detective Ben worked with prosecutors to obtain an arrest warrant for Kenneth Russo on charges of first-degree murder in the death of Emily Carter. The DNA evidence was compelling, but Ben wanted to give Russo an opportunity to confess and hopefully reveal the location of Emily's remains. On March 18, 2021, Detective Ben and two other officers arrived at Russo's apartment in Kissimmee. Now 50 years old, Russo had aged poorly. His hair had gone grey, his face was weathered from years of hard living, and his hands shook slightly as he answered the door. "Kenneth Russo?" Ben asked, showing her badge. "Yeah. What's this about?" "We need to talk to you about Emily Carter." For just a moment, Ben saw something flicker in Russo's eyes. Fear, recognition, guilt. Then his expression hardened. "I don't know any Emily Carter." But DNA doesn't lie. Kenneth Russo was placed under arrest for the murder of Emily Carter, ending one of Florida's longest-running cold cases. The question that had haunted Clearwater Springs for over 2 decades finally had an answer. But when police announced who they had in custody, jaws dropped across Florida. Kenneth Russo wasn't just a random predator who had crossed paths with Emily Carter by chance. As Detective Ben dug deeper into his background, she discovered connections that made the case even more chilling. In 1997, Russo had been dating a woman named Jennifer Walsh, Danny Walsh's sister. Danny Walsh, the line cook at Mel's Diner, who had been obsessively asking Emily out, had unknowingly provided his sister's boyfriend with inside information about Emily's schedule, her car troubles, and her plans to visit Peterson's Auto Repair. Jennifer Walsh, now living in Georgia under a different name, agreed to speak with police about her relationship with Russo. What she revealed painted a picture of a manipulative and violent man who had used her brother's connection to the diner to stalk Emily Carter. Kenny was obsessed with that girl, Jennifer told Detective Ben. He would drive by the diner during her shifts, asking Danny questions about her. Danny thought Kenny was just interested in dating her, but it was more than that. It was creepy. Jennifer remembered July 15, 1997, clearly because it was the night everything changed. Russo had left their apartment around 10 p.m., claiming he was going to meet someone about a potential job. He didn't return until nearly dawn, and when he did, he was agitated and paranoid. He kept saying someone was going to try to blame him for something he didn't do, Jennifer recalled. He made me promise that if anyone asked, I would say he was home with me all night. 2 weeks later, Russo abruptly ended their relationship and moved out of Clearwater. He told Jennifer he had found work in Tampa, but she later learned he had actually moved to Jacksonville, where Nicole Brennan would disappear in 2003. The connection to Danny Walsh also explained how Emily's car had ended up abandoned on Route 19. Russo knew Emily's routine because Danny had inadvertently provided him with that information. He knew she would be driving home alone on Route 19 after her shift ended. What remained a mystery was the location of Emily's body. Despite extensive searches of areas where Russo had lived and worked over the past 24 years, her remains had never been found. But Russo's arrest sent shockwaves through every community where he had lived since 1997. Police departments in 6 Florida cities reopened cold cases involving missing young women. The Nicole Brennan case in Jacksonville was officially linked to Russo through circumstantial evidence, though he had not yet been charged in her disappearance. Most importantly for Robert and Linda Carter, their 24-year nightmare was finally nearing an end. The couple, now in their 70s, had never given up hope that Emily's killer would be found. When Detective Ben called to inform them of Russo's arrest, Linda Carter broke down in tears. "I always knew someone out there had the answers," she said. "I just never thought I would live long enough to see them caught." But the legal battle was just beginning. If you're still watching, I have to ask, how many other families are still waiting for answers like this? Hit that subscribe button and share this video because every cold case deserves this level of attention, and your support helps us tell these stories that the world needs to hear. Kenneth Russo's trial for the murder of Emily Carter began in September 2022, 25 years after her disappearance. The case had attracted national media attention, partly because of the long delay between crime and arrest, but mostly because of the compelling DNA evidence that had finally cracked the case. Prosecutor Amanda Rodriguez knew she faced challenges. There was no body, no murder weapon, and no eyewitnesses to Emily's actual death. The case would rest entirely on circumstantial evidence and the DNA found in Emily's car. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Rodriguez began her opening statement, "Emily Carter trusted someone on the night of July 15, 1997. She trusted someone enough to let them into her car. That trust cost her everything." Rodriguez methodically presented the evidence: Russo's DNA in Emily's car, his connection to the diner through Danny Walsh, his pattern of stalking young women, and his suspicious behavior in the days following Emily's disappearance. The prosecution's strongest witness was Jennifer Walsh, Rousseau's former girlfriend, who testified about his obsession with Emily and his strange behavior on the night she vanished. "He came home different that night," Jennifer testified, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like something terrible had happened, and he was trying to hide it." Rousseau's defense attorney, Michael Torres, argued that the DNA evidence was contaminated and that his client was being railroaded for a crime committed by someone else 25 years ago. "Kenneth Rousseau is a convenient scapegoat," Torres argued. "The police needed to solve this case, so they found someone with a troubled past and pinned it on him. DNA evidence can be transferred innocently. Maybe Mr. Rousseau bummed a cigarette from the real killer. Maybe he helped jumpstart someone's car. There are innocent explanations." But the jury wasn't buying it. The most emotional moment of the trial came when Robert and Linda Carter testified about their daughter and the 25 years of anguish they had endured. "Emily was going to be a veterinarian," Linda testified, clutching a tissue. "She loved animals more than anything. She had her whole life planned out, and someone took that away from her, from us." Robert Carter's testimony was brief but powerful. Looking directly at Kenneth Rousseau, he said, "You took our baby girl, and you've made us live with that pain every single day for 25 years. I hope you rot in prison." Rousseau showed no emotion during the testimony. He had maintained his innocence throughout the proceedings, refusing to reveal the location of Emily's body or provide any details about what had happened on July the 15th, 1997. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Kenneth James Rousseau, guilty of murder in the first degree." The courtroom erupted in applause and tears. Robert and Linda Carter embraced Detective Ben, thanking her for never giving up on their daughter's case. Kenneth Rousseau was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At 51 years old, he would die behind bars. But even with Rousseau's conviction, one crucial question remained unanswered. Where is Emily Carter? Despite his conviction, Kenneth Rousseau has never revealed the location of Emily Carter's remains. In the 2 years since his sentencing, he has refused all requests for interviews and has provided no cooperation to authorities searching for Emily's body. Detective Ben continues to follow leads about possible burial sites, working with cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar in areas where Rousseau lived or worked in the months following Emily's disappearance. So far, the searches have been unsuccessful. The Emily Carter case has become a textbook example of how advances in DNA technology can solve even the oldest cold cases. The cigarette butt that seemed insignificant in 1997 became the key to justice 24 years later. But Emily's case also highlights the importance of never giving up on victims and their families. Robert and Linda Carter's persistence in keeping their daughter's case in the public eye, combined with Detective Ben's dedication to reviewing old evidence with new technology, made Rousseau's arrest possible. Since Rousseau's conviction, police in 6 Florida cities have reviewed cold cases potentially connected to him. While no additional charges have been filed, investigators believe Rousseau may be responsible for several other disappearances between 1997 and 2019. The case has also sparked changes in how Florida law enforcement handles DNA evidence from cold cases. The success of the Emily Carter investigation led to increased funding for the state's cold case DNA initiative, which has since solved 12 additional murders and disappearances from the 1990s and 2000s. For Robert and Linda Carter, now both in their mid-70s, Rousseau's conviction brought a measure of peace they had never expected to find. But their greatest wish, to bring Emily home for a proper burial, remains unfulfilled. "We know she's out there somewhere," Linda Carter said in a recent interview, "and we won't stop looking until we find her." The search for Emily Carter's remains continues, but her family finally has the justice they waited 25 years to receive. The Emily Carter case serves as a powerful reminder that no murder is ever truly unsolvable. Advances in forensic science, combined with dedicated investigators and the persistence of grieving families, can bring justice even decades after a crime has been committed. But this case also represents something larger: the thousands of families across America who are still waiting for answers about their missing loved ones. According to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, there are over 600,000 missing person cases reported annually in the United States. While most are resolved quickly, thousands remain cold for years or decades. DNA evidence has revolutionized cold case investigations, but it requires resources, funding, and investigators willing to take another look at old evidence. The Emily Carter case cost over $50,000 to solve, between DNA testing, investigation time, and prosecution expenses. Not every jurisdiction has those resources available. That's why cases like Emily's are so important. They prove that justice delayed is not always justice denied. They show that families should never give up hope, and that one piece of evidence, even something as small as a cigarette butt, can change everything. Kenneth Russo thought he had gotten away with murder. For 24 years, he lived freely while Emily Carter's family suffered. But science, persistence, and justice finally caught up with him. The question now is, how many other Kenneth Russos are out there, thinking they've escaped consequences for their crimes? How many other families are waiting for the phone call that Detective Ben made to Robert and Linda Carter? DNA technology continues to advance. Genetic genealogy has begun solving cold cases that seemed impossible just a few years ago. Cold case units across the country are getting new funding and resources. For the Kenneth Russos of the world, the message is clear. You can run, you can hide, you can change your name and move to a new city, but your DNA doesn't lie, and justice has a long memory. Emily Carter deserved better than to disappear into the Florida night at 19 years old. She deserved to become the veterinarian she dreamed of being. She deserved to grow old with her family. Kenneth Russo took those dreams away, but he couldn't take away the love her family had for her, or their determination to find the truth. 25 years later, Emily Carter finally got justice. And somewhere in Florida, she's still waiting to come home. The fight for Emily and for every victim like her continues, because in the end, every life matters, every family deserves answers, and every killer should know that no matter how much time passes, justice will find them. Kenneth Russo learned that lesson too late. Let's hope others won't make the same mistake. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the families still waiting for answers, then do something about it. Share this video, subscribe to this channel, support the work that keeps these forgotten victims in the public eye. Because Emily Carter's voice was silenced in 1997, but her story and her family's fight for justice echoes on.